My name is John Scott, and I am an alcoholic.
Hi, John.
And it's by the grace of God, strong sponsorship and actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've managed to stay sober since December 19th, 1982. And the topic, it sounds like, is fear. And I'm afraid that I drank a little too much iced tea before I got up here tonight. And I'm about ready to freeze down, but Bill says I'll warm up here quickly. So I want to thank certain members of the committee for asking me to speak. I feel like I had an in, and I was at this conference. Cindy and I was at this conference. I don't know, a couple of years ago, and our host and hostess this week has been absolutely phenomenal. I know you other speakers have probably had fairly decent hosts, but not like us. We happen to have a host and hostess that give us a grandkid to play around with, so it's kind of been a great blast. It's been a good trip for us, and it's always good to be here. It seems like this is kind of getting to be a home away from home. There's all kinds of folks here that we met over the years and gotten to be pretty good friends with, and it's good to see you folks. My mom died a few months ago, and I seem to have a hard time giving a talk anymore. It seems like I've always got other things on my mind, and about 30 days after my mom died, a guy that I sponsored with 25 years of sobriety, he died, and on that same day my dad had a heart attack. My dad's had a stroke since then, and now I got a call yesterday, and he's in the hospital again. So I'm headed to San Angelo, Texas. It's one of those places that you really got to be going there to get there. And in the morning, so I'm going to miss tomorrow's talk. But I don't know. It's just the way things are. I thought that when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, the way some of these old folks sounded, like everything was going to be hunky-dory for the rest of my life, and it just don't work like that. It seems like I've had a lot of times that I really needed to drink, it seems like, but I just never got around to it because of you folks, and I'm really glad, because it seems to me that every time I ended up getting drunk, I ended up getting more trouble than what I started out to have, and it's because of people like you in rooms like this I've been able to stay sober. It's an amazing process for a guy like me, because I like to drink. I like to drink. I like to do drugs. I do everything, and anything to screw up my life. I just love it, And I've absolutely I've enjoyed my sobriety. I really have. It hasn't always been wonderful, but I got to tell you, it's always been pretty good. It really has. And geez, I'd have missed the whole thing if it was left up to me. Because I have the secret weapon. I'm sure that there's one or two people in this room that have the secret weapon. It's that gray matter between your ears. I'll tell you how good my secret weapon works. I'm in the ranching and farming business, and here, about a year or two before it was about a year before I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, which had almost been about 25 years ago, I got a new banker. And me and this friend of mine, we went out looking for hay one day, and we were discussing this new banker that we both had gotten, and we hadn't met him yet, And I don't know if you've got a business like mine, it's really important that you take care of your banker. You kind of got to really treat him right. And me and this guy are out looking for this hay this day, talking about this new banker. And the way we looked for hay is, I'd buy a fifth and he'd buy a fifth, and we'd just drive around looking at hay. I mean, wasn't too deep. And that night we ended up at I drink at one or two places usually. I also drink at the Keg Bar or the Northern Hotel. And the Northern Hotel was a really nice place. The Keg Bar was not so really nice. And I remember that night me and this friend of mine, we ended up at the Northern, and we was having a few drinks, and lo and behold, here comes this new banker. And Jay says to me, "There he is. That's the guy." And so we sent him a drink, and he didn't wave to us. He didn't say thank you. He didn't send us a drink back. Now, I got the secret weapon inside here that starts telling me what's going on. Obviously, I'm going to be foreclosed on in just a short period of time. and he doesn't want to get to know us. And so we sent him another drink in about an hour, and nothing. I mean, not even a smile. So it's obviously I'm going to have to leave the state. And about a third hour goes by, and we send him another drink. And this time he gets up and he comes over. The people he's with, they went home or something, and sat down next to me and my friend Jay. And almost immediately, he and I got into this argument about sheep, me and this banker. And I got to tell you, I don't know nothing about sheep. I've never been around them. I don't know how to work them. I don't know how to take care of them or nothing. But we got, I have the secret weapon. And that means that once I have 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 drinks, all of a sudden I begin to know things that I never knew that I knew. And I can tell you that this argument was really, it really got to be really deep. And this guy would tell me things, and I would disagree with him, and then he'd disagree with me. And my friend says, let's go have something to eat. Come on, guys. This is not going well. Let's go. And I hate to eat. I mean, if I'm drinking, I hate to eat. You used to always kind of, you $5 bill, reckon $100 drink, drunk, and you just didn't want to. Who wants to eat? Well, Al-Anons like to eat, but I want to drink, and so but anyway, Jay talked me into getting in his car. And I don't know about you folks, but when I have quite a few drinks, I get really tired, and I just laid down in this banker's lap and went to sleep. I mean, that's how you impress a new banker, so. Lo and behold, a couple of months later, I ended up finally going to AA mostly because of her, but I had to go to AA because my life was absolutely upside down, and I hated every part of my life. And I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm sitting there in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous for 4, 5, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. About 9 months guess who walks in the door? It's my banker. I had to make amends to him. I says, I got to tell you something. I don't know nothing about sheep. And he says, listen, buddy. He says, neither do I. So that's how my secret weapon works. And I enjoy drinking. I like to drink. I just like to drink. It just absolutely always helped me be better at whatever it was I thought I was doing. And Cindy and I, we've been together forever, it seems like, and I can remember after I was sober for a few months, we went to eat at a restaurant one time, and this guy was over there kind of talking in tongues. You know how we'll do if he's by himself and he's doing that. And I said to Cindy, I said, thank God I never got that bag of it. She got one of those Al-Anon looks at, just all of a sudden it's like, what are you talking about? That's the way you always were. So I have no concept. I don't know how I can live with me as long as I live with me and not know a dang thing about me. But that's kind of how I came to you. I always want to remember how it was the last day I drank. I woke up in the basement of a friend's house. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know what house I was in. I don't know if you guys have had this experience. It's like when you wake up, it's like, it's like, I always hate waking up like that because you always got to ask people about what you did. And I hate people who know more about me and what I've been doing than what I know about it, and it always causes a little friction in my life anyway. And anyway, that morning I stumbled upstairs and this friend of mine, and I had been on a drink. I'm the kind of guy who kind of, it's Thanksgiving or so, and I go after bread, and next thing you know, it's like Christmas. I mean, that's how I operate. And I woke up, and this is the 18th of December. It's getting pretty close to Christmas. Thanksgiving's been over for a while, but I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I have these black periods in my life, and I thought that's the way you're supposed to drink. I seem like I always blacked out. If you're blacking out, you're kind of doing it right, it seemed like. And I can remember waking up in this basement and just absolutely not having a clue about what was going on in my life. I couldn't even find my pickup. I don't know where it was. And we got upstairs, and so we started looking for this pickup of mine. And somebody it's like they'd steal it or something. It's like it'd end up in places I'd never go, But we found it, and he'd been drinking a lot, I've been drinking a lot, and there's a friend of mine, his name is Frank, and Frank, I was running a feedlot at the time, and this Frank would come out and visit with me every once in a while, and one day Frank came out, and I was always glad to see Frank. Frank was kind of like Bill and Ebby, you know, and like Bill said, he was really glad that Ebby was coming because now I can have a few drinks. Well, Frank was like that. Frank come out, and I was going to have a few drinks with Frank, and the next thing you know, Frank wouldn't drink with me, and I couldn't figure it out. And I said, Frank, what's going on? Well, he says, I got to go to a meeting later on this afternoon. He says, I don't want to drink. He says, the fact is, I'm not drinking today. Now, that's something really wrong with Frank when he's not drinking, because Frank and I drink a lot together, and he just wouldn't do it. And I'm kind of an obnoxious drunk. If you don't want to drink with me and have fun, I'll have fun with you while I'm drinking. And I can remember I was down in the basement where our bar was, and Frank would try to leave, and I'd just kind of grab him by the hind leg and drag him back down the stairs and put him in the chair, and we'd have a few more drinks. And I kept asking him what was so important, what kind of meeting would be so important that you couldn't have a few drinks with your old buddy John. And finally he tells me he's going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, God dang, Frank, I think you're overreacting a little bit, don't you think? And I said, shoot, Frank, you drink just like I do. And Frank says, yeah, I know. And I, you know, Cindy and I at the time was kind of getting this divorce. Cindy was the black belt Al-Anon. I didn't realize it. This is the kind of people this is the kind of person I was married to. I was, you know, like I said, one of the favorite places that I drank was at the Keg Bar, and that's, you know, Keg Bar was kind of where the truck drivers and the motorcycle guys, and kind of like all these has-beens and wannabes and ne'er-do-wells, they all met there and drank, and I felt right at home. And them guys, it was kind of a depression period in Billings at the time, and Cindy told me one morning that she was going to go find a job, and I had to laugh because I've been down there at the Keg Bar with all my friends. Some of them people hadn't had a job in over a year and a half. They'd been looking all over the place, couldn't find a job. I didn't know that I was married to an Al-Anon. She went into town that day, got 3 jobs, and worked all 3 of them. And she was working that day that Frank showed up, and I was telling Frank about Cindy and I. We wasn't getting along. She hated me and I hated her, and I was trying to get a divorce. And Frank is having kind of the same kind of marital problems that I was having. And, you know, I couldn't figure out why in the heck he was going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And he says, well, he says, my life is really bad. And he says, I needed some help. And he says, I think it's helped me a little bit. I said, well, Frank, my life is really not going really well either. And maybe you'd take me to a meeting. He says, no way. He says, yeah, I ain't going to take you to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, well, why not, Frank? And he said, well, it's really simple. AA is for people who want to quit drinking, and obviously you still want to drink. And I don't know how he knew that, but anyway, I can remember waking up that next morning going, my God, I almost overcorrected. I almost went to AA last night. And, you know, I was so relieved. You know, I had to die one day at a time for the next 6 months. So Johnny and I, this guy that I woke up in his house that night, on the 19th, on the morning of the 19th, I told Johnny, I said, you know, there's one guy I know who's in AA. His name is Frank. Let's go see him. And Johnny says, all right. He says, let's go see him. So we drove down to the feed store where Frank worked, and I walked in there, and I told Frank that me and Johnny were thinking about quitting drinking. And Frank was happy to see us. He was really happy to see us. It was only about 8 o'clock in the morning. Johnny and I had already gone to the store and got us some beer because I always get real nervous when I drink a lot. And so Johnny and I was having a few beers, and Frank come out with these 20 questions. I don't know if you guys have seen the 20 questions. You know, nobody can pass the test, 20 questions. And I can remember he had these 20 questions. He's giving it to me and Johnny, and shoot, we were both flunking. I'm cheating, and I'm still flunking. I think, you know, it says that if you answer 1 right, you could be 2, you probably are, and 3, you're cooked. You know, and I figured that I had the secret weapon. I figured, well, here's the deal. Alcoholics Anonymous. The name is not going to help. You know, people are not going to be flocking to a place called Alcoholics Anonymous. So what these guys have done is they come up with this test, 20 questions that no alcoholic or nobody who even drank a little bit could pass. Now, I gave that test to Cindy Zelly 99s at home every once in a while just for the fun of it. They can't pass it. They can't drink right, and they can't pass the test either, just like we, you know. And so I ended up taking this test and flunking it. And so I asked Frank, I says, well, John and I, we'd kind of like to go to AA. How about taking us to AA? And he says, no way, because we was drinking. It was already drinking. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. And Now, I've had people come up to me and tell me that's not right. Well, it may not be right, but that's exactly what happened. Frank says to me, he says, well, I'll tell you what you do, John. He says, you guys go and drink all you want the rest of the day. But tomorrow, don't drink, and I'll take you to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I always like to remember that last day, how much fun I had drinking. I sat over there in the keg bar by myself in the corner crying because I was alone and lonely. And every once in a while, one of you guys would come by and want to talk to me, and I'd want to fight you. And then you'd leave, and then I'd be crying because I was alone and lonely. And that's how most of that day went, all day long. And I finally, that next morning, I woke up and I thought, my God, I got to do something about this stuff. It's just killing me. This drinking is just killing me. It was one thing to have fights with my wife. It was another thing what was going on inside. It was like everything I ever stood for or wanted to stand for, every respectful thing that I wanted to do in my life was getting chipped away a little piece at a time. I mean, I could not be trusted. My word was absolutely worthless. I had no integrity. I could not make a commitment. I had no responsibility. I mean, everything that I wanted to be, I was a zero. And I knew it. And I hated myself, and I hated everybody around me. It's something, you know how it is. It's just that blackness, and it gets darker and darker and darker. I mean, I've been working on trying to commit suicide. I've been trying to drink myself to death, all kinds of things. And it's like nothing was working. And I went to that meeting that first night, and I almost sometimes feel like you almost need to make an apology. I've never had a drink since then. Now, some people, if they're new here tonight or today, you don't have to go back out there and drink again. You really don't. And I don't know why I was able to stay sober and some people can't. I just have. I've just been able to stay sober. And I think it's because I was more afraid of drinking than I was not drinking. I was given the great gift of desperation. And I got to the place where I got terrified when I drank, because when I drink, anything can happen. And I mean anything can happen. And I got to that first meeting of AA that night. Frank had called up and says, come in a little bit early. He says, I want you to meet this guy Richard. He's my sponsor, and I'd like you to meet him. And, I knew about AA. I had the secret weapon. I knew about AA because what the deal was is you would take advantage of people who were down on their luck like me, and you'd start going to these meetings, and the next thing you know, you'd have to pay $25, $30, $40 a month, and that's what the sponsor was for. You had to pay him to take care of you, and I just know these things. I mean, it just comes to me, and I can remember going in there, and geez, they were happy to see me. They was laughing and joking, and I was just shaking and rocking and rolling. I wasn't feeling good at all. They ordered a steak, and they wanted me to have one, and I didn't want it, but they ordered it anyway, and they ate it. And I just sitting there, I didn't know what to expect. I was scared to death because, I can live okay if I can have a little drink every once in a while. But what happens to me is when I quit drinking, everything gets tighter and tighter and tighter and goofier and crazier. My wife gets weirder and the kids get stranger. And the people that I work with are just absolutely work at making me go nuts. And I have to have a drink every once in a while to keep all that calm down. And now we're talking about quitting drinking. And I know you guys are talking about one day at a time, but it sounded to me like forever. I don't know if anybody else got that, but it sounded like it was going to be a long time thing. There was people in that group, they were lying, but they was telling me they had 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 years. Now, why would you do that to yourself? There was a guy at that first meeting, however, and he was sitting right next to me, and I asked him, I says, how long have you been here? He says, I've been here for 2 weeks, and he looked like he'd been there for 2 weeks. He was a nervous wreck, But I thought, by God, if he can do it for 2 weeks, I can do it for 2 weeks. It's an amazing deal what happens to us here sometimes. The new guy seems to be able to talk to the new guy better than sometimes the old folks, it seems like. It's an amazing deal. I was very fortunate to be with that guy that night, and as far as I know, he's still sober. I sponsored his brother several years later, and you get to AA, if you're like me, you get to AA, and I'm always trying to figure the angles. I'm sure there's probably one or two people in here like that, but I'm always trying to figure the angles. What do these people really want? Because I can't believe that a group of people would freely give their time and their energy and their lives to other people just so they can get better. You know, there's got to be more to it than that. It can't be that simple. You know, there's got to be, and so for the longest time, I'm holding back. I don't want to, you know, why would I rush into anything that might really help me? You know, so I'm holding back. I don't want to do what these folks are really talking about doing, because it sounds like a lot of work to me. And that first night I was in this meeting, and they said, you need a sponsor. And this guy named Johnny says, yeah, and I'm going to be your sponsor. And so he says, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to come home with me. So he took me to his house, and he introduced me to his family, and he introduced me to his wife. And they started talking to me about how great their life was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and now that he's been sober for 7 years, and his life is really going good. And he talks to me until about 2 o'clock. Now in Billings, Montana, at 2 o'clock the bars close, and he says, well, it's 2 o'clock now, it's time for you to go home. So I went home, and the next morning he calls me up and tells me to come in. He was an auctioneer, so I came into town, and I was just absolutely rocking and rolling, because I've not drank anything, and I need something to drink. And he sits there and talks to me for a couple of hours, and the next thing you know, 2 guys from AA show up, and they take me to lunch, and the next thing you know, 2 more guys from AA show up, and they take me to supper, and the next thing you know, 2 guys from AA show up, and they take me to the meeting. And after the meeting, Johnny says, it's time for you to go home with me now. So I go home with him until 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock comes, he says, it's time for you to go home. The next morning, I end up at his place, and then guys showed up again the next day doing the same thing. I was a nervous wreck. They fixed this concoction of Karo syrup, orange juice, a little bit of honey, some vitamins. I don't know what kind of vitamins. Put it in a blender. It says, drink this. It'll make you feel better. And I don't think it made me feel better, but almost immediately I got to acting better than I felt. And I would tell them I feel fine. I don't want any more. I had about as much orange juice and syrup as I could stand. You know, hadn't had a piece of pie in years, and I didn't feel better right away. But something was changing though. There was something that I was getting out of those meetings that I was missing in my life, and it was a little thing called hope. And I didn't really know whether or not this thing would work for me, but I felt like you guys for some reason, you guys were able to connect to me at a level that I had not been connected to in a long time, and I began to believe that you believed. And I began to believe that you had an answer for at least yourselves, and maybe, if I was lucky, I'd be able to do what you guys have done. And little by little, I started to be better than I felt, and I started to get hope. I started to get that feeling that maybe something will happen to me. And within a short period of time, and I usually say about 40 days, I don't know how long it was around 40 days, my sponsor Johnny started getting weird. And he would say things like, you better come over to my house, because they're in the closet and they're about to get me. I mean, I was new, but I was not stupid. He would say, you better get over here, they're outside in the cars and they're watching me. And I get phone calls from people that he was sponsoring, and they say, have you talked to Johnny tonight? And I said, yeah. And they said, he's a little twisted, ain't he? I said, yeah. And then Johnny would call right after that, who you been talking to? Who you been talking to? And, I talked to these old guys in the group and asked them what to do, and they said, just stay close. Just stay close. And within a few more days, Johnny went out and got drunk after 7 years of sobriety. And he taught me a great lesson. He taught me that time was important, but it wasn't the answer. And this friend of mine, this Frank, had this sponsor named Richard. And Richard was a guy who ran around in a 3-piece suit, smoked cigarettes like this all the time. And he was a little rigid and kind of nervous. And I knew that I needed to get a new sponsor. And I've been looking at this little blonde. She kind of had what I wanted, and I was willing to go to the next to get it. And I remember walking across the room that night, because that's kind of my first resentment. I didn't get to pick my sponsor because Johnny told me he was going to be my sponsor, and I didn't get to pick, but this one I was going to pick. And I can remember Richard just kind of coming out in front of me and says, sorry about your sponsor. I hear he's out drinking. I says, yeah. He says, well, I'm going to be your sponsor now. I said, well, Richard, I don't know if I really want you to be my. Oh, he says, I didn't ask you if you wanted me to be your sponsor. I'm going to be your sponsor. He says, you need a sponsor, and I need somebody to sponsor. He always knew what I needed. He was a used car salesman, and in about 2 weeks, he sold me a diesel car. You know. Oh, there was all kinds of weird people in my home group. There's this little old gal named Millie. And Millie would sit there in her same little chair night after night after night. And it kind of gave me a sense of well-being just with her being there. She never said much. But if I sat next to her every once in a while when I was new, she'd say, geez, John, look at all the miracles. I'm looking around. I ain't seen it. She says, you just keep coming back. She says, one of these days you'll be able to see the miracles because they're all around you. And there's this other old gal. Her name was Margaret. I don't even know why they bothered calling her Margaret. Margaret, they'd ask Margaret to chair, and she'd say, my name is Margaret, and I'm an alcoholic. And them that stay sober, or them that go to meetings stay sober, and them that don't. Thank you very much. We call her Margaret 6 months from now. She said, my name is Margaret, and I'm an alcoholic. And them that go to meet and stay sober, them that don't. Thank you very much. It's like, geez. Come on, I need a little more than that, There's this guy named Gerald who was in our home group, and Gerald was a guy from down south, and it was terrible. If they called on Gerald early in the meeting, you knew who was going to talk at the end. If they called on Gerald at the end of the meeting, you knew it's going to be a long meeting. Gerald just goes on and on and on and on. And then there's a guy named Rotten Ralph. Now, Rotten Ralph was an attorney and earned the name. And he had to sit there and he would hammer on, say, like some new guy who had been saying bad things about his wife. He would sit there and just hammer on him. And then after he got through, he'd always keep his dollar for his collection plate in his shirt pocket and say, now, if I've really pissed you off, he says, let me be the first to buy you a drink. That's no way to treat a new guy. I know. And there's a guy named Nick. And Nick's favorite deal was, if you've been in this group for less than 6 months, there's absolutely no need for me to learn your name whatsoever. It's just a bunch of, they was talking about love and tolerance was their code, but it wasn't their code. And, I was just having a hard time with Cindy because she was just so weird. And I was trying to get away from her, and the sponsor of mine, this Richard, he says, now, how's your relationship with Cindy going? Well, I know that he'd been talking to Frank, and Frank had been talking to Cindy because they were old buddies, and so I knew I kind of had to tell him the truth. And I said, well, I'm getting a divorce. He says, now let me get this straight. You're the one who's getting a divorce? And I says, yeah, I'm getting a divorce. She's crazy as a loon. Oh, yeah, he says, I'm sure she is. Anybody stay with you for 13 years has got to be plumb out of her mind. And he says, I'm going to tell you something. He says, you're not going to get a divorce. He says, we don't make any sudden changes for the first year. And he says, for you, a divorce right now would be a sudden change. He says, besides that, he says, you don't know how to have a relationship, and we're going to work on that. That's one of the things that we're going to work on is having a relationship. And man, I tell you what, I didn't want to hear that because I really kind of wanted out of that deal because I didn't even like her a little bit. And I just, somehow I just listened to this guy. Like I told you, he sold me that dang car to begin with. And I can remember, I thought, I need a second opinion. So this Nick, after the meeting, I thought, well, there's two things I want to happen here. First off, I want him to remember my name, and I want to tell him about how bad it is I've got at home with her, And so in my best newcomer language, I don't know if you guys ever did this kind of stuff when you're trying to get an old guy to kind of suck into your deal. And I says, Nick, you got a few minutes? Could I, after the meeting, there's 8, 9, 10 people around, the meeting was over. He says, sure, John, sit down. And so I started talking to him a little bit and telling him about how bad my life was with her. And he jumps up out of his chair and says, so you're an alcoholic. What are you going to do about it? That's what I want to know. What are you going to do about it? And I was so embarrassed, and I thought, That's it. I'm leaving. I'm done with Alcoholics Anonymous. These guys don't understand. They're a ruthless bunch of drunks, and I'm not going to fool with them anymore. And I can remember getting up, and I was walking out the door, and Nick was a little old guy, and he was crippled up on top of that, and he gets me up against this refrigerator and pushes me and says, now listen, kid, you're wasting my time and their time and your time. He says, all you're trying to do is go out there and get drunk, so get after it. Just get out there and get drunk. And over the top of his shoulder, out of nowhere, comes Rotten Ralph with his dollar. And yeah, let me buy you your first drink. Let me buy you your first drink. You know, just absolutely just drove me crazy. I jumped in that diesel car, and I'm going to spin gravel, you know. And I floorboarded that thing as hard as I could. It's just. And I'm driving home, and I'm cussing, and I'm yelling, and I'm hollering at I don't want you to think I was immature or nothing, but I just absolutely going crazy about this group of mine, this crazy group of mine. You know, a few days earlier, this Gerald had sat there, and he says, how you doing, John? And I told him, and he didn't want to know how I was doing. He wanted me to lie to him. I told him that I hated God, hated AA, hated her. And he says, quit that. He said, I'm so sick and tired of that crap. He says, from now on, when I come up to you and I shake your hand and I ask you how you're doing, John, I want you to tell me that you're getting better in every way every day. Thank you very much, Gerald. And I got that going on. I got Ralph's deal. I got Nick's deal, and I got Richard trying to keep me with her. This is not what AA should be about. I mean, we're supposed to learn about how to quit drinking, not all this stuff. And I can remember just driving that car and just crazy, just absolutely crazy going home. And it's like something happened to me somewhere along the road. I had a long ways to go, and it's like all of a sudden, all I could hear is Nick's voice going, you're wasting their time, you're wasting my time, you're wasting, so you're an alcoholic now. What are you going to do about it? And it started to click on me. It's like, so I'm an alcoholic. What am I going to do about it? And that night and the next day, it's like it started to come to me that I need to really take a serious look at what's going on in my life, because of myself and by myself, I simply self-destruct. And I kind of knew this. And I thought, my God, I'm going to have to go back to those people. They seem to be the only people that I've ever been around. I mean, I've been around preachers and priests and treatment center people and shrinks and you name it. And those guys, they seem like, it seems like I'd always kind of tell them the truth, but not really the truth. But these guys seem to know what the game was. And they seem to understand the nature of the illness. And I can remember finally deciding somewhere that next day that I needed to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. God, I hated to go back to get in that diesel car, drive back there, give Ralph back his damn dollar, reintroduce myself to Nick, shake Gerald's hand, Gerald, I'm getting better in every way every day, thank you very much. Start listening to my sponsor about my relationship. But something happened. It was like, for the first time in a long time, I was willing to listen to somebody else help me get better. Thank God I was that sick. If I had been a little bit more well, I probably never would have came back. But I was that sick. I was so sick, I was willing to listen to these people try to help me. And that's all they was trying to do. They was just trying to help me. A year later, this lady shows up that I had barely met just right when I first got there. And she says, she wanted to see Nick, and Nick had died. He had cancer, and I didn't know he had cancer at the time. He talked to me that night he had cancer. And she says, I want to thank Nick, and I want to thank Ralph. And I said, what for? She says, do you know what those two guys did to me one day? They just team tagged me, Nick got me up against the wall and told me that I was wasting his time and their time and my time. And that doggone Ralph come at me with a damn dollar and says, why don't you just go get drunk? That's all you're trying to do. And she says, and by God, I showed them. I didn't get drunk, and now I'm here to thank them. It's like, them sons of guns, But that's how they seem to have this little dog and pony show that they pulled off pretty well with people with secret weapons, I guess. And what an amazing process. I was so fortunate to get into a group who seemed to understand the nature of the illness, who seemed to understand that if you pat me, at least a guy like me on the back, it'll kill me. because I'll con you. I'm just that kind of guy. And little by little, I started doing things that I really didn't believe in, and it would help. This relationship that I had with Cindy, I mean, my Lord, I mean, if you had a wife like mine, you would drink too. You've heard that? Well, you would. I mean, I sat there and I could not believe these people trying to keep us together. It's like I didn't want any part of that. And Richard says, Don, I'll tell you what I want you to do. He says, I want you to go home, and I want you to tell your wife that you love her. And rigorous honesty program again. They got you lying, and I can remember. It's like, I just don't think I want to do that. He says, I want you to tell her that you love her, and I want you to show her that you love her. Now my ears started going up a little bit right there, but he said, not what you're thinking. He says, what I want you to do is I want you to start cleaning up after yourself. He says, every once in a while, I want you to take the garbage out. I want you to clean up the kitchen. I want you to take her out to eat. He says, I want you to date her. I want you to treat her with kindness. And I told him, I said, I just don't believe I want to do that. And he says, I don't really care whether or not you want to do it or not, but I want you to do it. He says, but I'm going to give you a carrot. If you do it and you do it right, it will drive her crazy. Well, I believe I'll do it then, I said. So sure enough, I went out there and I started to do those things, and she went nuts. I just yes. It was fantastic for a while because I was doing my inventory at the time, and I went out there one day and she was one of these gals that it's like I couldn't understand why this was what was happening, but it's like up until I got to alcoholic, I was just a worthless damn drunk, and when are you going to do something about it? And as soon as I got into AA, it was like, well, you wasn't that bad. You don't need to go to those meetings. You wasn't as bad as those people. And it's like I couldn't figure this out, So one night I'm trying to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she's going through this little deal that she did trying to keep me from walking out the door to go to an AA meeting. And I told her, I says, listen, I got to do this. I really do. And she started taking my inventory. She'd been working on it for quite some time, I guess. And she started taking my inventory about I did this wrong and I did that wrong and I did this wrong. And I had been working on mine, so I just pulled mine out and I said, well, you missed a few. And so I went down the list on these things that she missed, and I can remember you could just see it just cratered. She just walked off in the other room, and I ran and told Richard, just loved every part of that. And it's like little by little, in spite of ourselves, we started to get better, and it's an amazing deal. I'd have got rid of the wrong person. When I was trying to commit suicide, I'd have killed the wrong guy, and I just would have made a tremendous mistake, because I got to tell you, over the years now that we've been in AA and Al-Anon, things have really gotten better. They really have. It's just been a blessing. And I love my wife. I love her a lot. And she's just absolutely phenomenal. She's been a great member of Al-Anon. She's been a great mom and a great wife. And it's just been a blast. It's just been a blast. But I'd have missed it, see, because I know what I need. And the trouble is with me, knowing what I need is not what I need. What I need is the stuff that you guys give me here. One of the biggest things that you hear over and over again is working with others. How in the world can I work with somebody else to make me feel better? It's like that just don't make no sense. But this society that we have here is upside down and backwards, it seems. And it seems like everything that you think you know, you don't know. It seems like everything that you know that you have to have, you really don't need. But the things that you don't need, that you know you don't need, you really need. I need to develop a relationship with you. I don't know I need that. I need to develop a relationship with a power greater than myself. I don't know that I need that. I know that I need to begin to be able to believe in this altruistic movement. And I don't know that I need that. I think I need more money, more power, more prestige, more tools, more barbecue sets. Geez, I've gone through a rash of that. I know everybody else in here is not like this. I only bought 3 in the last couple of months now. I don't even hardly cook. It's an amazing deal what happens when you come here and you start to work those steps. Those steps seem to be designed for a guy just like me. The doctor's opinion talks about how we have this allergy coupled with this mental obsession, and I can remember when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I really wanted to be careful. You really do. You want to be careful that you don't overcorrect and become an alcoholic if you're not an alcoholic, And they talk about this allergy coupled with a mental obsession. And I can remember talking to Richard about this allergy that I'm allergic to apples, bananas, cherries, and avocados. And if I take a bite out of any of those, my chest swells shut, my eyes swell shut, and I can't breathe. And they talk about this allergy happening and when I take a drink of alcohol. And I told my sponsor, I don't have any kind of abnormal reaction. He told me, yeah, you do. He says, you break out in spots like Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles. and I see. It's an amazing deal, But, it's not the same as those allergies that I have with those, like apples, say. I to this day, well, if you're a new person in this room, you can tell me exactly what my doctor told me about what to do about apples. Just don't eat them. It's pretty deep. That's one thing. But now you think about that. That's kind of like AA. I wanted AA to be really deep. If AA was really deep, if the spirituality was really deep, I might not be able to get it. It's like, why don't eat apples? Just don't eat apples, And I've never had to this day, I've never had to go to AA, Apples Anonymous. It's not happened, I don't sit there on a really wonderful day and decide, I'm going to go down and I'm going to have an apple. On a bad day, I don't go to the store and buy 12 apples, put 2 in the glove compartment, 2 in the trunk, and eat one on the way home, and get to the house and eat one right in front of her just to show that I can. It just doesn't happen. It's not the same. To this day, I have never been in a real fancy restaurant and looked across there and there's these people and there it is. They're having fruit salad. Why, Lord? Why can't I have fruit salad? Waves of self-pity flowing. But that sure happens with wine. I mean, if you're an AA, I'm sure that's happened to you before with wine. You sit there, and if you're like me, I'm watching those people and I'm thinking about, geez, why can't I have some wine? And then it dawns on me. I hate wine. I always hated wine. Wine made me sick. My deal is 2 at a time and keep them coming, and it's not wine. It's whiskey and beer, whiskey with a beer chaser. That's my drink, and it's like I got this imagination, this fantasy world that I live in. It's like it describes in the book. It's that thought process prior to taking the first drink. It's that problem that's centered in my mind. I don't have the same problem that I have with apples. I mean, there's no abnormal thinking about me having a good time eating apples, but it sure happens with booze. It seems like it talks about that. And I love Jim's story in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Especially the part where it says, "I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart." He said, "Oh yeah, Jim, that's good. That's good. You got that down." But it's like, and then it goes on. It says, "And the experiment went so well." I decided to have another. Boy, that sounds right. That sounds right. I'm with you. I'm with Jim on that one. But it gives us those 4 examples in that book, in that chapter, and it says mostly that they failed to enlarge their spiritual house. Now, we're like boxers. We're like boxers. We all know that we're going to have a fight. It's going to happen. One of these days, out of the blue, one of us is going to get this thinking idea that, I can have a drink. I was 4 years and 2 months sober. I had just completed one of the biggest deals that I'll probably ever complete in my life, and I was driving home from a town not too far away. And I was coming up on our bar that I drank at a lot. The bartender's name just happened to be John Scott. Now this is what I used to think was living. I used to jump in my helicopter and I'd fly over to John's place, and Cindy would call him, or I'd call him on the phone, and he'd come out, and he'd have a white towel over his arm, and he'd have a tray with a 6 or 12 pack of Coors Light with a 5th of black velvet whiskey. Now that's living. I don't care how you call. That's living. And I'm about 4 years and 2 months sober, and I'm driving down the road. My life has absolutely changed. I've just made a great deal this day, and I'm driving down the road, and I'm listening to a Clancy tape, and there's a thought that comes across my mind. You deserve a drink. And my other head says, yeah, you deserve a drink. And there was nothing that stood between me and that drink right then, except the effort that I had put into trying to keep my spiritual house in order. I was very fortunate at the time because I was actively involved in my sobriety. I was sponsoring people. I had been to a meeting that night. I was actively and current with my sponsor. I was listening to a tape. The only thing that stood between me and a drink was that my spiritual house was in order. My other mind says, yeah, you deserve a drink. And I remember driving down the road, and I was going to see my old buddy John. And it's like something happened. There's something happened. All of a sudden, it's like, I can't, this ain't right. This doesn't, and it's like all of a sudden my mind started to come back. And that's how subtle it is. And that's how quick it is. And it seems like we're all like that. We're all fighters. We're all going to have that fight, except we have to stay in shape. And the difference between us and a regular boxer is he knows what the date is. We don't know whether it's today, next week, 3 years from now. We don't have any idea. So that's why it's like this old lady said one time. She came to our meeting one night and said one thing that I'll never forget. She says, the reason that I come to meetings is because my brain leaks. That's good enough. It doesn't have to be too deep for us. If I get this thing to being deep, I probably won't make it because, just the way I am. I don't want to make AA too deep. I think AA is fairly simple. You go to meetings, you work with others, you pray. You try to keep current with the people around you. You try to stay involved. You try to treat other people like you'd want to be treated. It's really pretty simple. It doesn't have to be deep. You act as if and you will become. It's just simple things like that. That's what I love about Alcoholics Anonymous. But on the other hand, it's everything I need to stay here, provided that I just get me out of the way. That's all. It's an amazing process. It seems like I've gotten everything that I ever wanted, and I didn't even know this is what I really wanted. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I can breathe in and out most of the time. Don't get me wrong, Cindy and I. Sometimes we fight like cats and dogs. You would swear. Some days you could come over to our house at 8 o'clock in the morning and you'd swear that neither one of us had ever been to a meeting of any kind. But the thing is that it doesn't last because we can't afford it. That has a very high price tag. I can't afford to treat my own wife poorly, and she can't afford to treat me poorly. And it's just that simple. It's just that simple. I was sober for about 10 years, and my sister had a store, and she was really depressed. I mean, she's not like us. We can get, what kind of symptoms do you want? Okay, I can be depressed. No, it's not like that. She was depressed, and she's sitting there, and she's going, she wasn't, and somehow I ended up running this store of hers. And I called her up that morning, and I asked her, I says, Maggie, how would you like for me to take you out to lunch today? And she said, oh, I'd like that. And I was sponsoring this very wealthy man at the time, and he called me right after that and fired me as a sponsor. And he was really good because he was telling me why he was firing me. It was mostly because I was doing too much, and I was expecting him to follow me, I guess. And yeah, he was talking, and it's one of those conversations when you hang up the phone, it keeps going around and around in your head. And by the time lunch had came, I decided I went over to pick my sister up. This had been rolling in my head a lot, and I remember driving down the street. My sister hadn't smiled in who knows how long, and I remember telling her, Maggie, I think really the truth of the matter is I've overcorrected going to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, this is only, 10, 11 years sober. I mean, it's not like yesterday. And I'm going along there, and she looks at me funny. She says, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, Cindy and I was having some tough times there for a while, but, we got over that. And the truth of the matter is I don't really think I drink that much." And now she starts laughing, And she gets down laughing. She says, "Pull into the gas station. I need to go now." And she's just cracked up laughing, I can't figure out what's wrong with her. So anyway, I pull in the gas station. She runs into the bathroom, and she comes back and laughing still. I said, "What is so dang funny?" She says, "My God, you are sick, just like you've been telling us for the last 10 years. I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "You don't remember? You don't remember how you drank? You never drew a sober breath the last 3 years before you went into AA. What are you talking about? You wasn't that bad." I thought, my God, my brain does leak. Maybe I need to go to a meeting tonight. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. So I keep going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I keep having the time of my life. And every once in a while, I get this little thought, you wasn't really that bad. But just for the heck of it, I think I'll keep going, because I probably really was that bad. I have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. It seems like my mind is on the side of the booze. It seems like my mind is on the side of the disease of alcoholism. It has everything it needs to kill me, and my mind's on its side. So I want to keep coming back. I want to keep doing the things that keep me in the center, and it keeps having me the time. I keep having the time of my life while I'm doing it. Now, why wouldn't we just stay here and keep doing that? And I guess the reason is really simple. We're alcoholics. We're alcoholics. Our problem is centered in our mind, and our mind works all the time trying to get us to a place where we'll leave. So without help from a power greater than myself, I'm not able to stay spiritual.